Welcome to the Aligned Powerhouse, the podcast for executive women who are done leading from burnout and ready to rise from alignment. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany McGeehan, licensed psychologist, high performance and mindset coach, and guide for high achieving women who are ready to lead, live, and love without abandoning themselves. Here, we unpack the nervous system truths, mindset shifts, and emotional patterns that drive your leadership so you can build power from the inside out. Let's get into it. All right. Hello. Welcome back. Okay, I won't lie. Usually I feel like I start episodes and I'm like, I am so excited to talk to you about today's topic. And today I'm actually feeling nervous. I'm feeling really nervous about recording this episode because today we are getting into the hidden problems in therapy, but more specifically in the therapeutic systems that therapists operate within that no one wants to talk about, but yet the conversation is happening a million times behind closed doors, especially if you are a high achieving woman. And I was very on the fence because I have a lot of unpopular opinions in general, but especially about the constraints that therapists are forced to work under and the way that I believe we are underserving this unique population of women. And honestly, the thing that drove me to hit record, I literally had to take notes because I'm nervous. I'm nervous of being misunderstood. I am nervous of being told that I'm being anti-therapist, and that's not the case. But I think about the hundreds of women that I have worked with, and I've never had someone come into my office and not had some sort of conversation around the issues that people were having with their therapist or therapists they had worked with prior to. So I want to be very clear. The purpose of this conversation is to better inform high-performing women who are looking for support into like, what is it that you should be looking for and what is happening? Like, let's pull back the curtain here a little bit to let you understand what's happening on the therapist's end that does impact quality of care, and specifically that makes it really hard for high performing women to receive support that is in alignment and keeps up with, but also like meets you where you're at. So this episode is for you if you are someone who has sought support before and you have just felt like this isn't getting anywhere, and you've had that conversation with your therapist and you were like, am I crazy? Like, I don't understand. I need support. And so I went to the place where I thought you were supposed to get this support and it's just not working and I don't know why. I'm a very tactical based person, right? So there's going to be questions that you can be having and have in the back of your mind, and or have them with your therapist, because that is always my first question is, how did your previous therapist respond when you had this conversation with them? Too many times, especially in today's culture, we are told that if you're uncomfortable, the environment is not safe and you should go somewhere else. Sometimes that is the case, but more often than not, it is very healthy and appropriate to just have an honest conversation with that person and clarify what it is you're looking for, what feels like a mixed match. Like, a lot of times things can be worked out. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into the behind the scenes of what actually goes into a clinician, because a lot of times we're basing our decision to work with someone on their clinical prerequisites that they're coming in with, right? Do they have a PhD? Do they have a specialization in a certain thing? All of that is really important, but there's a lot that goes into, like we talked about the parallel process, right? So if you're working with a clinician who has a business but is not a healthy business owner, if you are someone who is operating a 6, 7, 8 figure company, then you want to know what kind of business mind this person has and what kind of work they're doing on the business end before you get into energetic relationship with them. So we're going to get into that. And yeah, just more about like this frustration. And I will say from my end, right? Like, my experience in my own therapy as a client was that my first therapist had me do one trauma-informed exercise, and he was like, I think it's done. And I was kind of looking at my life and I was like, I'm a garbage fire. What do you mean it's done? And so it wasn't a good match. And I also did not have the skills to ask for what it is that I wanted, right? Now, my second clinician that I worked with was phenomenal. And that was the person that I stayed with for years and that I would still go to for maintenance. Like, she changed my life, truly. I was very, very fortunate in that experience. But then, fast forward a few years and into motherhood. So my experience after having my second baby was that I suffered with postpartum depression really intense. Like, there were a ton of stressors going on in my own personal life. And I had an incredible village that was around me that I had worked very, very hard to pull together, but there was just a lot of, and it's very specific, right? Postpartum depression is a very unique, like, it's working at the hormone level versus it affects neurotransmitters, but it's like a whole thing. It's very different. And when I decided to go and try to get help through terms of medication, what I was told, like, by two well sought after psychiatrists, right, was you don't come up flagged. You don't come up as dysfunctional. And herein lies the first issue, right? So because I am someone who part of my dysfunction can be that I will over and extend use of coping skills almost to the point of rigidity. And sometimes to the point of rigidity, especially if I'm in a season of stress, but on paper, it looks great. So on paper, business was doing well. I was doing all the coping skills, right? I was exercising, I was eating well, but I was doing those things white knuckled. And it is possible that you are using your coping skills and that you are high functioning, right? That was part of what I got too, was you take incredible care of your children. And you see your friends and you're not isolated. And so I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to do for you. And my feedback that I heard from my midwife, because that's who I reached out to. My midwife was someone who was with me in both of my pregnancies, Dr. Terry Mitchell, Bundleborn in Frisco. Everyone should go see her. I love her. She is someone who very intimately understands the high performing mindset and how it can manifest in dysfunction with women postpartum and also in pregnancy and all the things, right? She was on this journey with me and is out here healing mothers like one pregnancy at a time. I just truly believe, I want everyone to experience being cared for by Dr. Terry. I called her and I just broke down, and she knew, because she had known me at this point for several years. And she was like, I know that if you're asking for help, there's suffering. And she said, it is very possible that you can be high functioning and doing all of the things and still be suffering. Those things are not mutually exclusive. This is the issue I see time and time again with women who come into my office, is that they've been told, but I don't understand. You have the friends, you have everything on paper. And because we in this society hold financial wealth, independence, freedom, autonomy, however you want to phrase it, right? Success, whatever, as being this, somehow it makes you a better person or whatever, like you get put on this pedestal and people will say, but I don't understand how you could need anything else. You look fine. You look presentable, put together, all these things. And coming from personal experience, it is one of the most isolating experiences that I think someone can have. And I see it a ton in the mental health industry. I was so fortunate to have, in my own experience, to have Dr. Terry to reach out and for her to be like, absolutely not. And I was able to, Zurzuvae, and I am not a psychiatrist. It is something to talk with your medical provider about. But I got on the right medication, and it gave me my life back, right? Because rigidity is not healthy, guys. I think we associate discipline with rigidity sometimes. And the reality is that we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for how many weeks in a row, right? Like the 75 hard, it's just nonsense. What we are looking for is a nervous system and a life and a system that can tolerate fluctuations, the up and the down, because that is the reality of life, is there will be ebbs and there will be flows, especially if you are a woman. And being able to tolerate those things is really what we're after here, right? So, but herein lies the first issue, is that in order to, a lot of therapists take insurance, which is phenomenal and like problematic all in one, simply because insurance does not function the way that it is meant to, the way that it is, well, it functions the way that it's meant to, but it does not function in service of the client or the clinician. Insurance is a business. Well, in order to qualify for insurance, you have to have an ICD code. You have to have something on file, right? You have to have a diagnosis to show your dysfunction in order to qualify to get reimbursement, all of these things, right? So if you are someone who comes in and you don't meet quote unquote criteria, and if you're not working with a clinician who knows how to look for things like complex PTSD and can decipher those nuances, well, then you're not going to meet criteria for depression. You're not going to meet criteria for anxiety unless this clinician is really on their stuff and they know what they're doing, right? So what I see happening is time and time again, therapists will say after being presented with information from client is, but there's nothing going on here. What exactly do you want to work on? And this person who is used to being go-to, who is used to being, I get everything done no matter what, and whatever it is, like, they that are frustrated because they are coming to be held, right? But then they're being told, what is it that you want to work on? I don't see any issues here, right? So this is issue number one, is that a lot of clinician or a lot of clients who are coming in who function in this upper echelon just feel deflated because their therapist does not have the know-how how to navigate providing care for someone who is operating at this type of level. They don't know how to decipher those nuances, and or their own stuff is starting to come up, right? So that is, we see a rapid rate within which high performing women are evolving out of more specifically talk therapy, but even like somatic work. Like you really have to be able to meet someone where they're at, prime them for the process, and then be able to move with them, right? So, and that is just simply a skill set that is not widely held within the mental health industry. But here's another big issue is that I see is that many therapists, and this is, I want to be so clear. This is not anything against therapists, and it's not even all therapists, but there are so many therapists who are incredibly burned out and are still working because what else are they supposed to do? They're in a system that, like, FYI, like reimbursement rates for specifically mental health, right? Where we are booking a billable hour. So we are not medical professionals who book like 15-minute little sessions and they can get a ton of them in and out, right? Like our reimbursement rates are so incredibly ridiculously low. And keep in mind, we are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars back in student loans, probably. We are paying thousands of dollars in trainings. We are paying more money in malpractice, in office software to like upkeep for the business itself, let alone if you are a phenomenal clinician, well, then that's thousands of dollars in training, right? Like we have bills, and that's not even living expenses. And so what happens is therapists are put in this position to see way more clients than what they actually have capacity for. Right? They are overbooking themselves left and right. Well, that is really important for you as a consumer to know. And again, it is not slight on a therapist. This is a therapist are trying to navigate a system. They're trying to navigate how to take care of themselves and their family, given the skill set that they have, right? But you as a consumer understanding that burnout is rampant and that you have a right to ask a question about that, right? Like you, even if we understand where this is coming from, we understand that it's no one's fault except for like this system that we're functioning in. That doesn't mean then that you are then not entitled to have that information about your provider. You still have a right to ask, how many clients are you seeing per week and how do you take care of yourself, right? This was something that I have asked every clinician I've ever worked with is, what does your own self-care practice look like? Because I will tell you that a burned out therapist has propensity to very, very quickly slip into an unconscious shift into this rescuer reflex dynamic. And that is different than handing someone the skills that they need to heal, to get better, because the therapist is then inserting themselves in a way that is no longer in service of the client. They can no longer see this woman sitting across from them. Now I'm seeing myself, and essentially, and again, therapists talk about this left and right, that like you have to be in supervision, you have to be doing your own work, because if you're not, you're going to go and you're going to try to work your stuff out on your clients unconsciously. So if you've ever had a clinician who you were sitting across from a therapist and you just felt like we're just missing the mark, or maybe, like that wasn't really for me, or this really just didn't land. I want you to also know that like, it may not have been for you, and you have the right to have that conversation. You have the right to have that conversation and to push back on the therapist. I think that is healthy and beautiful. I actually really celebrate that when that has happened in sessions for me, because the dynamics get really, really sticky. And especially if you know that your therapist is working in a season of burnout or stress, right? Like, I think most recently, my experience with this was pregnancy, right? Like working while I was pregnant. Oh my gosh, it was so stressful. And as a result, my business model had to evolve. It did not have, there's always a choice. From my perspective, there was a very easy choice there to be made because I had to take care of myself financially and capacity wise. I was not able to see 30 clients, 20 clients, even 15 clients. My business became very boutique, very small, because my caseload had to fund my lifestyle. It had to take care of me, because at the end of the day, it is a business. Even though every therapist, I have yet to meet anyone who is not told at some point, you don't get into this industry to make money, right? God forbid. We want to help people and also take care of ourselves and make a good living. But like it had to adjust, because my capacity was like 2-3 clients a day tops. And all of that was as a result of the fact that I was like physically fatigued. I was making a whole human. I was working through my own stuff. I was building the village. I was leaning into the village. Oh my gosh. When I was pregnant with a toddler running around at home, my caseload dwindled intentionally, very, very strategically. And honestly, that's been a big part of the most recent pivot out of one-to-one and into retreats. Is like, retreats are a way for me to continue to love doing the work, and for me to continue like doing the work that I love, but also love doing it, right? There's so much privilege in that conversation. There is so much awareness in that conversation, but it's something that you as a consumer need to understand. And again, that you have a right to ask about. How are you taking care of yourself? How are you using the things that we talk about in sessions, right? Because if you're over functioning as a therapist, then you are trying to fix someone, and ultimately you're responding to yourself versus the person who is sitting across from you. And when that happens, the person sitting across from you is robbed of their agency. Okay. And I want you to think also about the parallel process, because if this person is constantly in rescuer, and if that is a part of their identity, if it's the only thing that they have going on, that is really dangerous, because you are then being pulled into a dynamic that, if you are listening to this podcast, if you are a high performing woman, if you are sitting at the tippy top of a company, or you're running this Goliath of a company, whatever, then you already are primed to be rescuer, to be hero anyway. If you are trying to step out of that role, which is the nature of what you are trying to do, if you're building healthier intimacy, if you're stepping into healthier leadership skills, then you cannot be with someone who is still actively in that process. Now, hear me when I say a therapist does not have to be perfect. And that's a lot of the pushback that we get, right? Is we are held to incredibly high standards, I think, for a reason. And then I also think not for a reason. Like, there's pros and cons to all of it. My clients hear me say this a lot. Like, I want you to know who you're in the room with. I want you to understand who you're in the room with. And if something is ongoing, I'm probably not going to like name it out loud, right? But I am going to say, hey, this is a pain point for me. So I want you to take what I say with a grain of salt. Take it and listen to your own body and know whether or not this is something that resonates or not, right? And I was told by a supervisor once that a wish that this person had for me was that I would hold my cards to my chest more. And I think this works so beautifully with different types of clients, right? But I do not think that this works very well for someone, one, who is hypervigilant and notices the shifts, can sense when someone is holding something back, but it also is really just not primed for a high-performing woman. Like, high-performing women build safety when they understand the process, because they are always in the process themselves, right? They're doing the things. Give them a set of skills and they are going to go and do it. And so something that therapists can do within this population, but also you as consumer can know, I get to ask for this is, can you talk to me about your therapeutic process? What is step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Understanding it's not linear, understanding it's not perfect. But if you have a general sense of where you're going, you are going to be 10 times more likely to build safety and trust and be able to like melt and sit into your body just a bit, and therefore build those results that you're looking for, right? And again, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy that happens in the mental health industry that we really don't want to talk about. But I see it a ton on social media with like, and I do think that it can be playful and it can be silly and it can be fun. And again, no one is perfect, but I want to know realistically, like, is the person I'm taking advice from, is the person or that is giving me feedback or leading me through this process, like, are they doing these things themselves, or are they enacting these exact same dynamics that I am struggling with at home? Because I don't want to be in energetic relationship with that person in terms of my healing container. And on the other side, like, you need to know that if you're getting into a relationship with someone who is very passionate about the work and they are doing it on their own, then it is going to truly impact you on all levels, right? It's going to affect business. It's going to affect relationship with self. It's going to affect relationship within your marriage. And this is a good thing, but it's a powerful thing, right? And I feel that it is very, very important that women know that they have the right to ask for these things in their care. And again, I want to be very clear. The issue here is not the clinicians themselves, I believe. I believe it is the systems that they are functioning in. So again, it is the system that is requiring a diagnosis to bill insurance. Or you can be like me and you cannot accept insurance, right? Or I didn't whenever I was seeing therapy clients. And then what happened was I had to gain a ton of business skills and marketing skills in a very short amount of time. And so this leads to additional debt. So then you bet you're going to see that reflected in my rate. I talk about this with my retreats even, right? Like, my retreats are my baby. I love them. They by far get the best and the quickest results that I have seen with my clients over the last decade. But they are a monster. They are a beast to run them the way that I run them, because there is preparation that happens. There's preparation that happens in selecting my team. There is preparation in connecting with them and saying, hey, right now, is this a good time for you to be entering into this container? There's preparation that happens in training this team. There is preparation that happens before, after women have signed up and we know who's coming in as we are getting information, right? We have a prep meeting, we have an ongoing process, and then we have like an offboarding essentially that happens. So it is a monster emotionally, financially, energetically. Like, the team is down for a hot minute. So this is taking a ton of resources, even though it happens essentially over 3.5 days, right? Or 2.5 days. And therefore I charge for that, right? It is a 5-figure investment for a Thursday evening through a Sunday afternoon. And I am very confident, because I've done the research and the results and all of the things, that I can get the results that I say I can get, because I know how to vet people. I know how to hold that container. But that also comes with being uncomfortable enough to be able to say, like, yes, this offer, if you qualify to get into it, is $10K. And that is because I know that my overhead costs a certain amount. I know that my team costs me a certain amount. And it is very important that I am well cared for and that they are well cared for. And those are non-negotiables. And on top of that, when I do that, I am able to hold the container then for my clients. And not only that, it's built into my profit margins that I can run this retreat with 2 people, or I can run it with 3 to 4, right? And that is not going to impact the client experience. Well, that comes with a lot of discomfort and being able to say that, because it eliminates some of the population. It means that it's not accessible to everyone, right? These are uncomfortable conversations, but that have to be done in service of clients. And you as consumer have a right to understand that this is part of why those things happen, right? Because if you don't, the other end of it, the other choice, given the mental health industry and the systems that we're operating within, your choice is to be in this area of discomfort, or it is to be in this area of discomfort over here of being burned out and still working. And from my perspective, that is a very unethical place to be. I think it is hard. In some instances, it's just like a rock and a hard place from my perspective. And I have always told my clients this: I am not interested in taking your money if I am not able to deliver the result and the care that you are deserving of. I do not think a therapist, and oh my gosh, I have so many therapists who are so near and dear to me and will say, I know that I'm exhausted. I know that I'm this, but I can't afford to take any time off. And it makes me so angry at the systems that they are operating within. But from a consumer end, I also think that that is unethical care that is being provided, and that you have a right to ask those questions, right? Where are you caring for yours? Or because everyone gets burned out. So then, like, how are you adjusting? How are you planning on whatever? And your therapist at that point has the right to answer that question or not answer that question, because everyone is entitled to their own conversations and space and process, right? But this is just my 2 cents and something that I hear coming from my clients and women who I work with time and time again, right? Things that are significantly impacting their progress. So, I think the other thing that gets tossed in here and that doesn't get talked about is that high performing women, especially if they have done work on their own, right? Because I also think therapy and coaching and retreats or weekends or like whatever it is, it's not for everyone. Not everyone needs this specific container of support in order to be doing their internal work on their own. So a lot of high performing women will do some of this work on their own. So they come in at a different pace. They come in at a different area on their growth curve, and their systems tend to metabolize very, very quick. It takes a very skilled clinician to be able to notice if we are bypassing the nervous system and we're like living in our brain, which high performing women are so prone to doing, right? Or are they just metabolizing really, really? That is a lot of my clients, right? Is that they have done a lot of work coming in and they are ready for like next level, right? This is why I say like I am peak performance in relationships and like leadership. They all had a baby. Like it truly is about just expanding. Like there's not tons of dysfunction. It is simply, I want to be better. And with that, these women are very in touch with their bodies, but they're also moving very quickly. So they're going to metabolize very, very quickly. It takes a very skilled professional to be able to decipher the difference. And if you don't know where to push and you don't know where to celebrate, then both of those things can result in the client not making the progress that they want to make, right? Or the sustainability that they're looking for. A lot of times they are looking for deeper work than what CBT is going to be able to offer them, right? And what we see as a general trend with high performing women is that they outgrow clinicians very, very quickly. And again, there is a difference. And what happens, I will tell you behind the curtain, is that therapists will say, they weren't ready for the work. They weren't ready to push quicker. That is true sometimes. That is very true sometimes. The other thing that I think we get very uncomfortable about talking about is that sometimes the clinician was not at the area of growth that the client was, right? And I think this can be true across all industries, across all presenting problems or populations of women, or humans, not just women. I say that just because that's who I work with, right? But like, if they have not done their own trauma work, if they've not done their own nervous system work, from my perspective, if they're not doing ongoing body work, because that is the one thing that I do think should be consistently ongoing. I do not think every season of life needs to be heavy trauma work, but I do believe that we live in an overall stressful society. And so how are you consistently and ongoing taking care of your body in a way that allows you to metabolize your own stress? Have you done work on money? Oh my gosh, that's a whole thing with therapists, right? The relationship with it's a thing. I want to be very clear. I'm talking about therapists because this episode, that's my world. Everyone has stuff with money. Tech has stuff with money. Leadership has stuff with money. Healthcare has stuff with money. We have stuff around money and what we place on it because it is control, it is freedom, it is autonomy, it is intimacy, it is like all of the things. Okay, so I say therapist, but truly it is everyone. But like, have they done their own marriage work? Have they done their own embodiment practices, their own like work with their kids, right? If they have not done their own work, if they don't have awareness, and this is what I would be listening for as a client, as a consumer of a service, is not only do they know where they have done their work, but also their areas of growth. So that is something that I'm constantly, not constantly, that's dramatic, when it is clinically appropriate in service of my client, when I really want them to know that we've come up against a growth edge for me, something I don't have experience in, or something that is an active pain point, perhaps, right? I'm going to say something like, I want you to know who you're in the room with. This is something that I have unresolved business around, right? Now, this depends on client, this depends on readiness, this depends on goals, like all of the things. There's nuance there, but I'm listening for that as a consumer. I want to know this person across from me doesn't think that they've done all of their work, but also have they addressed these big issues that I am hoping to get to work through, and I'm hoping to get to work through fairly quickly, right? Or at a specific time point, because if they haven't, how in the world are they supposed to help me navigate these things? That is nonsensical. It's a very common saying in the therapy world, right? That you can only take your clients as far as you've been. This is double-sided and double-edged, because a lot of times this can be used and weaponized against clinicians of like, well, you should be doing this work and da-da-da. And I don't think that's true either. But I do think it's really important that, that consumers and high performing women, and especially if you are just sitting on a big whatever company, if you're making a certain amount of money, a lot of therapists are not, and a lot of therapists, and not, I don't want to say a lot. I want to say like the industry is just not something you get into to make money, right? And we have in fact been shamed and shied away from making money, right? You should be accessible. You should be this. You should be that. And so you need to know this person sitting across from you has done their work around their relationship with things that are active pain points for you. And, do they know what it is like to function under pressure if that is something that you're coming in to work on? Right? If they are not someone who is dancing this sort of dance that you are dancing, or interested in growing at the rate that you are, it's not to say that it's incompatible, because I also think they're oh my gosh, one of my most impactful therapeutic relationships I ever had was with a dear friend, Dr. Bradford White. So he's actually on this podcast a few weeks ago. We sit very, very different, right? We sit very different. And yet he is the person that I send a lot of my clients' partners to. He by far had one of the most profound impacts on my own healing journey as a supervisor, because he was able to move in his own way. It was different, but I really had to build up the skill set to be able to tolerate that and ask those questions, right? So I'm not saying it always has to be this way, but I am saying that if you're coming in to do a specific kind of work and you're ready to move at a certain pace, like, you have to have someone who can meet you where you are at. And I think it's very fair to say that in the therapeutic industry, there's not a plethora of clinicians who are going to move that way for a variety of reasons, right? So I also want to address this issue of there's a difference between the clinical mindset and the business mindset. And as a consumer, for me personally, I want information about both, because I want to know what I can bring in here and what I can't. And if you are someone who is high performing, you are an executive, you are in a place of leadership, unless you are coming to work only on one very specific thing, and that happens and is important and all of the things, you need someone who understands both and is sturdy in both of those, especially if you're a business owner. Okay. Because I think the two just move in tandem. But a clinician is trained to be helpful. A clinician is trained to follow rules, follow the ethical codes, and we're like, probably like HR is the comparison, right? Is that it's held over your head of like being this big boogeyman in the closet that is going to come out and get you if you don't follow the rules exactly in the right way as a therapist. And it's completely nonsensical. And honestly is like ridiculous, because truly the point of like an ethics board is to keep a client safe. they are there for a very important reason, but it gets weaponized, right? It gets weaponized in so many ways. And we live in such a litigious world that, I think when you come into contact with clinicians who are very black and white, who are very, I'm not talking about this, I'm not addressing this, I'm not opening up, I'm not whatever, you have to keep in mind what has happened to create that mindset, right? The reality is that we live in a very litigious world right now. And I have seen this a million times where phenomenal clinicians, because of the populations and just the world that we are working with right now, they can be scapegoated very, very quickly. So it's a very fear-based industry because of the society that we are functioning in. But again, as a consumer, as a client, I want that information. I want to know, how does that impact me and my care? Right? My clients know there are certain lines that I am like, nope, absolutely not. And here's why, right? It's important for you to know and understand, and then do your own critical thought of like, how do I feel about this? What do I think about this? And then there's this other end that therapists don't talk a ton about, which is the business owner mindset, right? And these are very important questions because they are revealing, like, there's nothing like entrepreneurship to show you where your demons are left in the closet, right? If you are a business owner, if you are leading a company, you know that your stuff comes out to play very, very quickly. But this really shows up for therapists in the way that they run their businesses. So questions that I'm asking is, how are you investing in yourself, specifically in your business mindset? Are you a part of a group? Are you investing in coaching? And if so, who are you doing that with? Because that matters too. Is your coach fear-based mindset, or are they like faith-based mindset? And I'm not saying faith like religious. I'm just saying like in general, maybe faith isn't the right word. I don't know. But like, is there some sort of comfort and groundedness, right? Are you able to invest in a team? Because the reality is that you're running a business. So even if you are a clinician who's not interested in building the business, but perhaps you as consumer, you're looking and you're saying, okay, but you are a solopreneur, you are running a business. You're not a part of a group. So you're not outsourcing your marketing. You're not outsourcing your admin. You're not outsourcing. Like, that is the benefit and the beauty, like the really phenomenal group owners that I know. That's what they are doing, is that they are savvy business owners, right? They enjoy the marketing. They enjoy building something and then creating a system that is safe for therapists to come into, right? But those therapists that are in a group practice, if the group practice is healthy, then that's how they have built their team. Right? If you're talking to a solopreneur who is on their own, you have a right to know, are you investing in your marketing? Are you investing in your operations team? Having a right to know, that might be like a strong word, because every therapist has the right to say yes or no to certain things, because with the nature of our work, we are expected to divulge a lot. And I just also don't think that anyone is ever entitled to anything. But I want to know those things, right? Like, I want to know who I'm in a relationship with, especially if I am someone who I'm running a business and I'm really good at delegating and I'm really good at meeting my KPIs and understanding where to go next. Well, as a therapist, as a coach, as a support person, if I'm not adept at those things and I'm very fear-based, I'm probably not a good fit, because I'm not going to be able to keep up with you. I'm not going to be able to say, cool, you've built your support system at work and you've done that here, but here at home, it's really time to look at house management. It's really time to look at a nanny. It's really time to look at potentially bringing in a personal chef, right? Whatever that is, because they have not even been able to conceptualize this within their business. And this is not a slight against them in the least bit, but as consumer, it's important for you to know, because it's going to play a role in whether or not you're a good fit or you're not a good fit, right? And are they holding themselves to specific outcomes, KPIs, whatever it is? And just for you getting curious about, what does this mean? How do I see this impacting my ability to trust that this person can care for me, right? So, because again, what this results in is clinicians who don't understand the pressure that a high-performing client carries. They can't really support or lead. And this is also where, like, you got to know what you're coming in for. You got to know what you're coming in for, because you might be someone who you're not quite in a space of wanting to even look at those things. Maybe you're very, very, very specific of like, I only want to work on marriage. I only want to work on my relationship with my kids, right? But when someone doesn't know what they need and what they are looking for, this is where I see them struggling to find the appropriate support. And this is where I see the mental health industry really struggling to meet the needs of high performing women, because there's this subset of women who has done the nitty gritty deep stuff over here. And now they're sort of playing in this land over here of like, I'm not in dysfunction, but also coaching isn't doing it either because they're so forward focused, right? I need someone who's in the middle. That's really who I'm talking to here. But do they understand leadership dynamics or identity expansion that comes with truly stepping out of the rescuer reflex, right? Like that is something that every therapist in the whole wide world forever and ever is like going to be so susceptible to, because that is the nature of our work. That is the nature of the world that we swim in. But like, and this is also where, I've had a client ask me, what does your husband do? Like, what does your partner do? And I thought it was such an interesting question. I asked them why they asked before I answered, but they wanted to know, I want to know if you live and breathe this stuff, this therapy stuff, or do you like kind of come out to play? Do you do other things? Do you whatever? And I discussed with that person, what does this mean to you? Like, where does this come from? Whatever. There's always something behind the question, but I do think it makes a difference, right? Like how much self-trust does this clinician who is sitting across from you actually have? And a lot of that can be revealed in the way that they tend to themselves in the business. And again, I think that there is just tremendous systemic issue there. There is tremendous lack of support for clinicians. So it is not about damning the therapist. It is not about saying this is not a good clinician. It is simply about understanding how to find someone who is a good fit, not writing off an entire industry simply because someone was not a good fit, but also addressing a need that just has not been addressed, right? And I think something I hear time and time again is, okay, I don't know if I need therapy, or I don't know if I need coaching, or if I need something in the middle, right? Because I do think we're seeing an emergence of an industry, a subset of clinicians who are clinically trained, excellent at what they do, and they're bridging over into coaching, and they're bringing elements of that framework, of that lens into the coaching containers. And there's so many reasons for that, right? But as a general rule, right, I would say that therapy is for someone who is actively in crisis. You are in active crisis and you need stabilization. This is also for someone who has severe, or just, I would say like untreated trauma, right? If you really don't have any concept of your history and there's big symptomology that is impacting functioning. So that is the clinical phrasing there that you would hear time and time again from therapists in terms of when we're making diagnosis, things like that, is, are these symptoms impacting functioning? This is what gets so great for high performing women, is that typically they do have some symptomology, but it's not impacting their functioning because that's like part of their dysfunction is like they're just moving, right? Versus coaching might be more appropriate if you've already done some of that work and you're looking to self-reflect and you're looking to implement quickly. Or if you are consistently outgrowing your coping strategies, right? If you're looking for results that are perhaps more expansive surrounding identity or transition. But also if your biggest pain point is a result of a consistent pattern, but it's not crisis-based. So it's pattern-based, it's not crisis-based. A lot of times what I see right now in the industry of self-help in general is that if you are having symptomology, you need to go to therapy, right? And I simply do not think that is always the answer. So you really need to understand which you're looking for. And again, how to advocate for yourself and truly find someone who is a good fit. And again, one of like the biggest things that I've talked with my clients over and over again is getting honest about like, is your therapist actually using the tools that they are preaching? Not perfect, not 100% of the time, not to weaponize this against anyone, but like, okay, are you practicing what you preach, right? If you are going to teach me boundaries, when have you held a boundary, or are you holding boundaries? What's your relationship with boundaries like? If you're teaching nervous system regulation, what does that look like? How are you practicing that? How are you prioritizing that, right? If they are teaching self-care, but they are consistently burned out and they're just practicing it, like that is problematic. That's going to be a big issue come the parallel process. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should go check out that episode. But, are they doing their work? And if they're not, how is that impacting their clinical work? Right? Can they also explain the why behind their recommending certain tools? This is something that every high performer needs. They need to understand the why. You cannot just go tell a high performer, hey, go do some box breathing, or go get some body work done, or go get this, or go get that, and trust the process, right? Because that's like a big thing. In the self-help industry is we're told, I trust the process, trust the process, trust the process. If you tell someone who is a high performer, who's used to boom, 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 boom going, trust the process, they're going to leave. And it doesn't mean that it was like a bad fit. It just means that is not appropriate or going to be a good match for someone who moves in the world like this. They need to understand the why. I see it time and time again. Women in my office, I will sit with them. I will explain, this is why we're doing it. This is why it happens this way. I do this a ton in my retreats. I set up the frame. This is why I move in the way that I move. This is why I show up in the way that I show up. This is why. And when this happens, their shoulders come down and they start to relax, right? It's not a control thing. It is simply that is how they establish safety. And they need to understand that if they're going to be able to lean into realizing the fact that like they do in fact have a body. Okay. Other questions that I would be paying attention to and perhaps asking is, do these sessions leave you feeling lighter, or do they leave you feeling heavier? And are you leaving your work with this provider feeling a lot of clarity or a lot of confusion? Because I just disagree with the notion that we're not supposed to explain things to clients. And this is what I hear a lot, is a lot of withholding, a lot of, I don't explain this. I don't ask if they have questions. I don't this, I don't that. And the reality is that it is very possible for a client to lean into the process and to have understood, and I would in fact say this is trauma-informed care, right? Understand why they're doing it. This is how someone who is a very controlling person by nature is going to be able to step into something that is new and foreign and still feel safe in doing so. That, and I think that you get to say, and you can even ask your therapist, right? Like, what is my treatment plan? What are my goals? And how do we make sustained and visible effort toward that, right? A lot of clinicians are not super results driven. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but this is going to be a mixed match thing if you are someone who is high performing. And so you want to know, like, I'm not just looking for awareness. I want to know, are my relationships tangibly changing? Perhaps I'm still having arguments. In fact, you'll probably be having them forever and ever and ever because you're human, but are the conversations, are the arguments getting more productive? Are you able to regulate? Are you feeling differently? Does your body feel differently? How is your sleep? How is your eating? Are decisions becoming easier and more clear as you're moving through this? Okay. So here's the thing is that, like self-awareness without any action to me is just like spiritual rumination. It's just what you're doing, right? Your therapist should help you move and not just spiral and stay here just for being there as a sake. Okay. So I am looking for nervous system progress. I am looking for relational change. I am looking for clarity. I am looking for increase in healthy intimacy, as well as like more effective communication patterns. I am looking at your ability to choose yourself and prioritize yourself. And again, this person sitting across from you has to be able to do that as well. And your ability to regulate rather than just jump in and rescue someone. Okay. So again, if you are in this process of looking for someone, then some things that I am looking for is, has this person done their own family of origin work? And what does that mean to them? Right? Have they actually gone and addressed these things with their family members? Not perfectly, but just in general, not just sit and talk about it and be like, oh my God, I have mommy issues. Like, no, like, have you actually gone and started the process? Have you started the process? And what does that look like for you? Do they have supervision? Have they had supervision? And do they have ongoing mentorship, especially if they are in the business world of having a private practice? Did they get supervision in, like, do not take for granted that the person sitting across from you, just because they have a degree or they sit with a blazer, they look a certain way, that all of a sudden they are an ethical clinician. Like, my degree is not, it's in school psychology, right? It's not in clinical work. I did that on my own. I had to pay a lot of money to get like additional training because I didn't get that in school. It's not what I went to school for, but no one would know. In fact, I was trained as like a researcher, right? Like PhD is like to prep you to go in. Now I wasn't necessarily completely prepped to go into academia, but like I came from a teaching heavy university. And a lot of people are really surprised to learn that. So don't read so much into a degree or whatever it is, right? Are they regulated and like genuinely regulated, not just like saying, yes, I'm calm? Do they have a very clear specialty? And more importantly, do they know who they don't work with? One of my favorite conversations with a client ever was one where they literally asked me, who would you not work with? And I freaking loved that question because I was like, here's my list. Right. And for whatever reason, whether that it hit too home, it was too personal, or I don't have the skill set, right? I don't have the skill set to meet this person's needs. Do they know when to refer out? Do they know how to take care of themselves in business? Are they comfortable about being direct about progress and the process? That is a big one. I want you to start it as you're going through here, because this is so important for high performing women. Is a lot of them need the directness. They need someone who is not going to like collapse in on themselves when they sit and they posture and they sit back with like their fancy coat or their fancy blazer or whatever it is. Like you need someone who is so comfortable within themselves as to not react to that, but rather be willing to call that out as like the posturing that it is, if that's what's happening, right? And the reality is that a lot of therapists are not. They need to be able to understand high performance and high performance trauma that comes in to create that pattern, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get to the root and like the results are not going to be sustainable. And they also need to have done their own work around success and ambition and all these things, so that there's not an ongoing trigger or risk of a trigger. I mean, there's like always risk of a trigger, right? But like, have they done their work around those things? So they're not going to respond to that, but rather they can stay regulated. You need a therapist who is capable of holding all of you and not one who shrinks when you expand. I was just having this conversation, oh my gosh, last week with a client who's someone on their team. Essentially, she has like outgrown this person, and it's not bad, it's not worse, but it is, as she moves into bigger spaces, it brought up stuff for this person on their team, and they were at risk of possibly shrinking just a bit. And we had to have a conversation of like, energetically, who do you want in your corner, in your space, if you are looking to move and be big and bad, right? This person better be able to meet that energy with you rather than get triggered by it. So I really want to leave you with like, I'm not saying that traditional therapy is obsolete. I feel quite the opposite, but I do think that there is a significant area of growth here for the mental health industry to really be able to provide support for high performing women, right? We really need to see more of like a hybrid model is what I would love to see, right? But one that is like nervous system healing plus identity expansion with like relational repair and like real life application, but also one that is taking into account that it takes time for these women to really come into their bodies. This is part of why I see the clinical results and success that I see with the retreats, because 60 minutes is not enough time. It's just not enough time if you are functioning here in your brain, like all of the time. It's going to take time for you to melt. And we got to have time for you to melt, to get into your body, to get things up and out, right? The way that you would like to see in order for you to be making the results that you want to make. And I think that I also want to leave you with this idea that like you can still love therapy, you can love your therapist and still ask for more. In fact, I think that's a very loving thing to do, right? Like if you are not being challenged, if you are not being expanded, if you're not being pushed and seen, it's okay to say this isn't my person. And also that doesn't mean that you're not worthy of support. That doesn't mean that you're not worthy of care or that there's something wrong with you. And a lot of times that's what I hear it being equated to. So I hope that this episode is helpful in demystifying some of the process that happens behind closed doors for therapists, for their high-performing clients. And I hope that it is supportive for you on your journey as you're figuring things out, right? Like if you are sitting here and you're listening, then what I know is that you want more and you probably move really quick. Otherwise, I'd probably drive you batty. And that's very possible. You just have to understand the constraints within the person or within the system that you are stepping into, depending on what industry you're going for support, right? So I hope that this was helpful. If it was, I encourage you to share it with someone else who needs to hear this message and needs some of these tactical takeaways today. And I will see you on the next one. Alrighty, friend, that is all for today's episode of the Aligned Powerhouse podcast. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And do me a favor, if this episode resonated, I want you to share it with another powerhouse woman in your life who is ready to lead and love from a place of self-trust. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review. It really does help more women find this work. New episodes drop every week. Until then, lead with self-trust and let yourself be seen.